Update on the meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and China's President Xi Jinping. I want to go across to our Strategic Affairs editor, Gaurav Sawant. He's joining us from right outside the Taj Fisherman's Cove, which is where this meeting is taking place. It's a beautiful machan where this dialogue is currently taking place. Do we know, Gaurav, how much longer will this conversation go on for, and what's the likely outcome going to be?
So, Rahul, it's scheduled to be 50 minutes, which means not much longer from now, but it could go on longer. Yesterday, too, the conversation went into overtime, if I may use that word. It lasted over, 2.5 hours, the dinner meet, and that is where there were issues. We were told that there was a lot of good conversation on trade and counter-terrorism and radicalization, which is expected to be a big part of the conversation right now. So, we are told that in a while from now, the two will then give direction to their respective delegations, especially on boundary issues and trade. We expect some forward movement, but this is what is coming through sources, Rahul. We're still waiting for an official word. Okay. You know, the whole boundary dispute, for which there used to be constant meetings, Anand, between special representatives, and there'd be conversation about how at some times there'd be some glimmer of hope that there was some forward movement. All of that is now on the back burner. It's almost as if, we've just brushed that under the carpet, pretending that there is no border dispute between the two countries. Where is the genuine conversation about trying to, at the very least, delineate where the boundary runs through?
I mean, we don't quite know what they've been speaking for 21 rounds, but from the outside perspective, it looks like it's just completely stalled, stalemated. And I don't see that much. I mean, I'm always happy to be surprised, but I don't see that much hope. And the focus has been on keeping the peace.
But the Chinese have been working on fixing their boundaries with other countries. While of course they've been making aggressive territorial claims, they've been trying to resolve disputes. Why don't they want to fix the boundary with India?
Well, most of the boundaries that they fixed happened at a very different time. It happened in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. They haven't, except for Russia, which took many, many years, and they finally solved it in the early 2000s and the 90s as well. It's only India and Bhutan are the only two countries with which they share a land boundary that hasn't been resolved yet. But the focus, as far as India and China are concerned, I think the thinking is that you cannot have a conversation on resolving it until you have a prolonged period of peace, which is why the focus has been in Wuhan and since on ensuring that there are better mechanisms to prevent things from like the Depsang or Chumar or Doklam standoffs from happening. So I think the focus still very much is on managing it rather than resolving it, only because the differences are so pronounced. It's very difficult to see where they begin that process.
Okay, Rajiv Dogra, how do you think this intractable problem should really be handled? Because from what we've been seeing recently, they're saying, okay, let's just try and ensure that there is some semblance of peace. Then we'll try and work towards the contentious issues, as opposed to wanting to deal with the contentious issues, getting stuck in a bind and not knowing how to move out of that.
Well, there are two ways of looking at it. For example, as Anand was saying, with Soviet Union, it started with a fight in the Urumqi River, I think it was, and then it was settled. When Soviet Union broke into pieces, 15 pieces, China managed to have boundary finalized with each of those Central Asian republics, and in each case it gained territory. The only two major disputes are Bhutan and India. Either we give in to the Chinese claims, which are enormous, in addition to 38,000 kilometers which they already have in Aksai Chin, or we try and retrieve the situation as best as we can. The chance was given to us, according to what history teaches us, many times during Nehru's talks with Chow En-lai. We lost the chance. There are some allegations that a similar chance was given when Rajiv Gandhi went to China. Again, we decided not to take up that offer as per Chinese offer. Now the stage has reached where China has further upped its ante, especially with regard to Arunachal Pradesh. So issue has become far more complicated.
So what we're seeing now is, first it was Manish Tiwari, then later Kapil Sibal of the Congress come out and attack the Modi government, pushing them to take a more aggressive position on the disputes between India and China. In fact, Kapil Sibal has put out tweets to say, as Xi Jinping supports Imran Khan on Article 370, Modi ji, look him in the eye at Mamallapuram and say, vacate the 5,000 kilometers of land in POK occupied by China, Trans Karakoram, and no Huawei in India for 5G. Show your 56-inch ki chhati. This is what he's saying. You know, when you're sitting in opposition, Anand, all of this is very easy to say. Not that they did any of this while they were in government. The Modi government's been far more assertive, but it doesn't harm when you're sitting in the opposition and have no stakes to fire a few broadsides.
No, it's very difficult to take any of what he says seriously because none of it is actually helpful or grounded in, as you said, in what the previous governments have done. And I think this, everybody does this political point scoring when they're in opposition, but frankly it doesn't help, because if they are serious about India's national interest in addressing some of these problems, making, I think, unrealistic expectations and claims, I don't think it helps anyone.
Okay, Geeta Mohan joins us as well. We've got Sushant Sareen joining us, leading strategic affairs expert. A lot of expectations riding on what that joint statement will finally have. And Sushant, the key would be not just to look at what the Indian side has said and what the Chinese side has said, but to compare the nuance of what's being said by the two sides to see if they came away from the meeting with the same outcomes, with the same takeaways, or they were sitting together in room but came out with different perspectives on what transpired.
Look, frankly, whatever statements are issued either by the Indian side or by the Chinese side after this particular meeting, I would not go read too much into it. I would want to see how going forward in the next few months, what are the kind of positions at least the Chinese take on issues of concern to India, whether it's on trade. And frankly, I think we are barking up the wrong tree when we talk about the trade deficit. I think what we need from the Chinese is fair trade practices. What we are seeing from the Chinese are sharp trade practices, which are basically to grab everything and not share the benefits of trade. So if we have a large trade deficit with China, that doesn't concern me. What concerns me is that the lack of market access or the very limited market access the Chinese give to Indians. So we'll have to see how that pans out. We'll have to see whether the Chinese take a far more nuanced position on issues like Jammu and Kashmir or any of the other issues. On the border question, yes, the Chinese have settled with other countries, but as Ambassador Dogra very rightly says, they've settled with other countries on their terms. And we are not ready for that just yet. The problem, however, is that while there is peace along the borders, it is a very accident-prone relationship as long as the borders are not settled. Because you might have the next Doklam, you might have the next standoff somewhere, and all it takes is one hothead for matters to spiral out of control. And nobody wants that to happen. But will the Chinese want to go in for a border settlement at this point in time? Now, we very glibly say that let's demarcate at least our perceptions of the line of actual control. The moment you do that, that pretty much seals the deal. How do you move forward from there? So I think those are going to be very serious problems, and I'm not very sure that the Chinese are in any hurry at this point in time to settle with us, unless we are willing to settle with them on their terms. But going forward, I would like to see what are the kind of positions which the Chinese take on a range of issues to see whether they have actually understood our concerns, they have actually appreciated our compulsions, they are actually sensitive towards many of our core interests. I think that is going to be the real test case of what has come out of this particular informal summit.
We wait for this dialogue to get over, and if they stick to time, this dialogue should be getting over any time now. I want to show you some glimpses from that extravaganza that was laid out for the Chinese president yesterday. A beautiful cultural performance with Modi and Xi both watching, with the backdrop being those wonderful and beautifully lit temples in the back. Just sit back for a moment and watch Geeta Mohan and Gaurav Sawant's report on the cultural extravaganza on day one of the Modi-Xi meet.
It would seem Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping started off where they left in Wuhan. Prime Minister Narendra Modi came dressed in veshti, shirt and melamunda, the traditional Tamil attire. He received Xi with a warm handshake, the first in a long series. There were no hugs, but that was not expected in any case. Prime Minister Modi, who had received Xi in Ahmedabad in 2014, this time played the Tamil host, putting India's diversity in spotlight. He took Xi on a tour of the historic monuments built by the Pallava dynasty 1,700 years ago. The Pallavas had close trade links with the Chinese. The two leaders exchanged pleasantries over coconut water. No aides or bureaucrats, just the translators. A direct conversation. Modi and President Xi then walked past the Panch Rathas and headed to the impressive Shore Temple as the sun set over the Bay of Bengal. The performance at the decked-up Shore Temple gave Xi Jinping yet another taste of the arts of South India before the two leaders sat down for dinner. Diverse South Indian cuisine were on platter at the special dinner hosted by Prime Minister Modi in honor of the Chinese president. Friday's bonhomie between Modi and Xi amid the cultural setting was an ideal opening for the two leaders who will sit down on Saturday to discuss serious issues ranging from terror to trade. Bureau Report, India Today.
BJP spokesperson Shazia Ilmi now joining us on this broadcast. Shazia, welcome. What's the sense within the party about what's likely to emerge from this meeting between Prime Minister Modi and the Chinese president?
You know, as we all know, there would be separate statements, but I think this itself and this entire not just the optics, but the discussions and the warmth that is accompanied and the body chemistry that is between the two leaders, I think these pictures themselves state a lot and make a statement. I think there are issues of convergence and there are many contentious issues also. And as we discussed earlier, and I could hear on your channel, despite many rounds on the talks of LAC, this I think all this camaraderie that we see could pave way for the actual launch of the LAC clarification process. But I think more importantly, building on these ties, making sure that there are no further...
For a moment, it seems that meeting just got over. These are live pictures that are now coming in of Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping emerging from the Machan, which is where they were sitting. Now they've come. I see some lights being placed, so it's possible that there will be some kind of a statement. The cameras are being set up very quickly. So we will now see some kind of, or we're likely to see some kind of a statement from these two leaders. That meeting which they were having just getting over. These are live images on your screen right now from the Fisherman's Cove, and it's being set up for the two leaders to now brief the media. And then this is where it gets interesting. It'll be interesting to see what they have to say about the meeting. Can I just stay quiet for a moment and see if we can pick up some audio from there? Let's see if we're getting some audio just yet, but I can also see they're trying to set the cameras up, so I'm not sure if they're ready, but you can see with the lights that have been put out, that's to balance out the frame because it's really bright sun outside, it'll be dark inside in the shade where they're sitting, so they're trying to fix that. And there will be statements now from the Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President. Anand.
Rahul, as you said, I think here's where the brass tacks and looking at what they choose to emphasize. But having said that, I wouldn't expect the statements to reflect entirely what was said. That wasn't the case in Wuhan. They spoke about lots of things that weren't finally reflected in the statements, and you would imagine that a lot of what's going to be publicized was probably agreed by both sides before this conversation was had this morning. So we can't expect to know everything that was said today. That's why they want this informal summit format. But at the same time, I think it gives us a good barometer of where the relationship is, what issues each side wants to focus on and emphasize. So I think here's where we get some sense of whether how much progress has been made since
you know,
she
if
got
you
here
look
yesterday.
at the body language just for a moment, and we can get Rajiv Dogra to come in on that. Between Modi and Trump, it was far more informal. With Xi, he's more formal, which is also possibly because there's a language difference and the general attitude, because Trump is a different kind of guy. Xi is a far more formal person. So the whole, just his body language and the whole, it's less informal and more structured, it seems.
And that is why the jaffis with Chinese have not taken place for the last year or so. Chinese are a little more formal in comparison to Americans in general and leadership in particular.
Okay, so I don't think they did that statement, or they haven't done it yet. They're out though, sitting, looking. It'll be really hot in that bandi and that jacket in Mamallapuram at this time. Gaurav Sawant is joining us. Gaurav, they're seeing the sights and sounds like they did yesterday. Will there be any kind of a statement? Will they be addressing will they be making brief statements to the media? And by what time do you think this joint statement is finally going to be coming out?
As soon as the delegation level talks are over, we will have the statements from the Chinese side and the Indian side. But a lot of this is also work in progress, depending on what emerges from this informal summit, because a lot of it has been planned, it's in the works, but the two, Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping, could then decide that it needs to be taken differently, and then we will hear it either from them or from the statements that will be put out, because in between it was also being said that instead of two statements, that could be one statement. But then again, we're still waiting for an official confirmation from the spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs. Sources maintaining that so far, everything's looking very positive in terms of their body language, their interaction, the dinner, the time that they spent together, even after dinner. If they were supposed to spend just about an hour and a half together, they spent over 2.5 hours together. Again, today it's lasted more than 50 minutes. So it again, and then they'll have another one-on-one during lunch, Rahul. So perhaps there'll be some forward movement even there. So our emphasis, we are told, is likely to be trade, terror and radicalization. What will China's emphasis be, and whether China would want to, in this bilateral, figure in aspects that some of China's friends, especially our neighbor on the west, may want to raise? That also remains to be seen, and that will also perhaps have an impact on the way this relationship is taken forward, Rahul.
Okay, trade, terror, those are the key dimensions of what India would like to focus on. Okay, so they moved away from where those cameras were, so they obviously just had that photo opportunity, no statement. Now they're walking back. It's all eco-friendly. They're using electric vehicles, which is a good sign. So there's some good positive messaging to a larger population watching. Go out, plug the beaches in the morning, clean out your plastic. That was strong messaging from Prime Minister Modi. Yeah, the use of electric vehicles. Earlier this morning, you see that on the side of your screen. These are, others would say, those like Sushant Sareen would say, these are easy things to do. Where's the meat? Where is the actual forward movement? All this is well and good. And I love that drone shot. Look at that. It's up on the screen right now. They've got these drones flying all over. Shazia has been a TV producer and anchor in the past. This is a very, very fancy television production, but we haven't yet seen that statement to emerge from this. Gaurav, any sense of what time it will be? Because even yesterday we saw this, that the Foreign Secretary actually came out past 11 to make his comments on Modi and Xi's meeting and what emerged from it. It took quite a lot of time. Or, as Anand says, it's already probably been decided that this is what that statement would look like, and that's ready and will be put out very soon.
Absolutely. So what Anant is saying is very likely that it's already in the works. Remember, our foreign minister was in China. They have been having a series of interactions. It's just the final touches, the direction that the two heads of state and government would be giving, that would be added to these statements, the final push, so to say, and then those statements will be put out. But then again, there is still a one-on-one at that lunch, and that's again a private lunch. So in that private lunch, will something else also emerge? Because now they give their directions to their respective delegations. So you have the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval there. Interesting if we see any forward movement on the boundary talks. Do we also see what kind of engagement will we have on counter-terror drills which had stopped post-Doklam? I mean, you'd recall those drills are now are to take place later this year. Will the scale be enhanced? Will it be same scale? All of that. There'll be very subtle forward movement, not some massive transformation in India-China relations is the indication. And again, officials say it's better that you move forward step by step than not move forward at all.
Okay. That statement goes, keep your friends close, keep your enemies even closer, and therefore, Sushant Sareen, it makes sense to not get caught in intractable differences, but to contain differences in a way that you can move forward on the issues where there is some convergence, leave for later the issues in which there is divergence.
I completely agree with you. So, look, I don't have a problem with the fact that the two principals are meeting. I don't have a problem with either the unstructured or the informal thing. I'm just keeping my expectations of what will emerge from this very realistic. So I don't expect much to come out of it. And the reason I say that is the kind of Chinese behavior we have seen, particularly after the August 5 decision on Jammu and Kashmir, but even before that. So I'm keeping my expectations extremely realistic. Does that mean that I am not in favor of engagement with China? Certainly not. In fact, the more the engagement we have with the Chinese, the better it is for us. The Chinese might not be our friends, but they are our neighbors, and they are a normal country. They are not like Pakistan, which considers its conflict with India as a civilizational conflict. The Chinese are doing what every great power or every great country which is now emerging to be a great power will do. So I don't see anything which they are doing as unnatural or something which hasn't happened in the past by either a Britain or a France or a United States. So I don't have a problem with that. And I expect them to do something like that. Now I have to find how I counter that, how I manage my affairs so that that does not affect my interest. And that is where my focus has to be. Now, if Anant is right that the officials are already working on what either side is going to say, then I would not be surprised if what we get at the end of it is a fairly anodyne statement which talks about all the issues which have been touched, but does not say or does not indicate to any major forward movement, except perhaps a few benign takeaways like happened after Wuhan, that we will jointly train Afghan diplomats. How much that stacks up to becoming something substantial is before us. It doesn't lead to anything major. So will we see something like that? Or will we see something bigger than that?
Remember,
we'll get
after the meeting between the two principals, what's going to happen now will be the delegation level talks. So after the two leaders have had their one-on-one meeting, there will now be the delegation level talks, which is where the likes of Jai Shankar, the likes of India's ambassador in China, the likes of Ajit Doval will be in the room as well.
I think that was similar to the format in Wuhan as well, where it was, I think 80% of the time it was just the two of them speaking to each other, but I think they also had a small session with important officials on both sides, the NSAs and external affairs ministers. But I would be interested to see in Wuhan, what was interesting was the stuff that came out in the in the separate statements didn't have specifics. Later, we had the information that India and China were going to work on what Sushant just mentioned, on a project in Afghanistan that was briefed by officials on background. So I think there will be a lot of takeaways from Mamallapuram that isn't reflected in the statements they put out. We can expect to hear about it, I think, in the days and weeks ahead.
Okay. What we're also likely to see, this is after this meeting get over, is a press conference in Jammu and Kashmir, where the administration is likely to announce the easing of mobile connections, and mobile connectivity is being badly disrupted, even though it's progressively getting better. a big step towards restoring mobile connectivity likely to be announced today, even though that's a purely internal matter, but it's happening on a day when she is in India and would have at some point in time obviously had an opportunity to question Prime Minister Modi. I think the Indian government said, Mr. Dogra, that if the Chinese president wants to ask about Kashmir, we will explain our position. We're not backing down on our position. We'll tell him what we've done, why we've done it. India holding firm in that sense.
Well, absolutely, and I think it's a wise thing, even if the Chinese president were not to ask, for Prime Minister Modi to take this opportunity to blot out all the negative propaganda that Imran Khan did 2 days back.
Correct.
So, in my view, that is an important forward movement if that issue has actually been discussed between the two. But two more things. One, I have a feeling that the developments in Syria, especially Turkish bombing of Kurds, may be discussed. Equally, the developments between Saudi Arabia and Iran, because the energy supplies to both China and India could be affected if the situation escalates there. So these two are important issues where perhaps even in their separate statements there could be some mention.
Okay. Geeta Mohan joins us, our Foreign Affairs editor from the Media Center at the Fisherman's Cove. Geeta, what is likely in this delegation level talks? Who all will be attending?
Well, Rahul, it is a very important delegation level talk that is going to begin in just moments from now. The meeting that was to take place was to take 40 minutes, took about 60 minutes. We've seen that yesterday also they overshot their time. There was a huge traffic jam in Chennai because Xi Jinping did not leave in time, and now again they have overshot their time. The one-on-one continued. You saw the visuals, you saw how warmly the two leaders met and were discussing various issues. We will have to again wait and see what the outcome of that one-on-one meeting is going to be. But for now, delegation level talks will begin with opening remarks by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping. And after that, there would be talks between the leaders and the officials from both sides. On the Indian side, we have Dr. Jaishankar, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. We have Vikram Misri, the Indian ambassador to China, and Naveen Srivastava, who is the Joint Secretary, East Asia Division, looks after China, and of course the MEA spokesperson Ravish Kumar. On the Chinese side, we have Yang Jiechi, one of the senior most leaders and a Politburo member. He was the special representative for the longest time, former foreign minister. Wang Yi, the current foreign minister and the current special representative on boundary question, followed by Li Hifeng, who is the head of the NDRC, Luo Zhaohui, who is the vice foreign minister, former envoy, Chinese envoy to India, played a critical role in the decision on Mamallapuram, given that he was a student over here in Puducherry, and of course certain other officials, particularly the interpreters. Again, very important. There are two interpreters. If you see, Rahul, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is either flanked by a young Indian, diplomat called Priyanka from the Indian mission in Beijing, or Madhusudan, who was an Indian diplomat in Beijing and now is posted in New Delhi. Both Mandarin speakers, very fluent. Madhusudan particularly has been by Prime Minister Narendra Modi's side many a times in many of these occasions where bilateral meetings with the Chinese side really takes place. So those are visuals of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping walking down to the area where the delegation level talks will take place. What will be important is that in these 2 days, Rahul, this is the first time that we'll be hearing from the leadership. They are going to make opening remarks, and that would be significant because that would be a takeaway from what happened yesterday and what transpired today.
Okay, and what are people in the MEA that you've been speaking to saying about how the dialogue and the talks have gone so far?
Well, it has been in a very cordial atmosphere. You have to give it to both the sides, Rahul. When it comes to Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, they share a different level of friendship, and that goes beyond the formal ties between the two countries. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is somebody who has been engaged and connected with China even before he was Prime Minister as Gujarat Chief Minister.
Thanks for watching the video. For more such news and updates, please like, share and subscribe to India Today. Also check out our other great videos from our channel. We know you will love to.